My name is Calvin Cheung-Miaw. I'm with OrganizingUpgrade, and I'm very excited to talk with Beth Huang as part of our series of interviews with members of the Democratic Socialists of America. As folks know, DSA has been going through really amazing period of growth. It's exciting for everyone on the left, whether you're in DSA or not. And we're bringing folks the voices of members and leaders in the organization. So Beth, why don't you tell us a little bit about just your background before you joined DSA?
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Beth Huang, and I'm the co-chair of Boston DSA. I joined in the week after the 2016 election, as I think all of us were grappling with our own kind of existential crisis. And joining DSA was the one scenario that didn't involve quitting my job in a nonprofit. So I'm glad to still be employed. But in reality, so I work as a coalition organizer at the Massachusetts Voter Table. We are building a voting bloc of communities of color, of working class people, young people, and immigrants. So it's all of the kinds of working class people who I think are necessary to lead transformative reforms today and potentially revolution someday. But in the wake of the 2016 election, doing nonpartisan civic engagement, quite honestly, felt like it wasn't going to be enough to defeat Trumpism. And so I felt like I needed to do something, or I really felt called to do something that was more ideological, more visionary, and so I joined DSA since I had met some DSAers over the years. I've been organizing for 8 years now. I'm originally from Wisconsin and grew up in Milwaukee and went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the very beginning of the Scott Walker era, and I was part of my campus United Students Against Sweatshops chapter, where we led student walkouts of 5,000 students going from campus to the State House. We rallied every single day. We were fighting union busting, voter ID, cuts to K-12 and higher education. Scott Walker was gutting everything that was good about the state of Wisconsin, and we were there to resist it. Unfortunately, though, after yelling, "This is what democracy looks like," for 6 weeks, after sleeping in the Capitol for 3 weeks, after chalking every campus building, leading student walkouts, and having what felt like a daily teach-in for several weeks, it still wasn't enough. And that was just a deeply agitating experience for me. And I decided to go into organizing after college and was a union organizer, and then went back to campus student organizing with the Student Labor Action Project, the joint project between the U.S. Student Association and Jobs with Justice. And got to know so many great people from the student movement and the labor movements together. And then while that was kind of hopeful, the kind of shock of the 2016 election, I think, called many of us to move beyond our organizing jobs into something that into another organization where we felt like we could do what we wanted to do with, wear our hearts on our sleeves, carry the socialist label as much as we wanted to. I think that we can get away with a lot in kind of progressive movement building work. But I think that the real appeal of DSA for me back in 2016 and still today is as I have lots of ideas at my nonprofit organizing job, I know that I can't actually do all of them at work. And there are some projects that I think are probably too explicitly left for for paid organizing, and I think that's what I've been able to do in DSA is think about what are the major organizing opportunities that are a little bit nascent but have a really strong left. But have like a really strong potential to build the left. And I think that I've been so fortunate to be part of Boston DSA to be able to carry out some of those projects.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some of those projects. What kind of work is Boston DSA doing that you find really exciting?
So one of them is really bread and butter. We had 430 new members join in the Boston area just over the summer. A lot of that was in the week or two after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's victory, which really speaks to the hunger that people have for the ability to win. And so that's so exciting. And so one of the really just bread and butter projects that I've been really excited about is organizing young people on the left into DSA and getting them plugged into other types of organizing. So I found that to be incredibly rewarding because people who are somewhere around my age, we all got screwed by the recession in some way. We all had to make some crappy decision at an age when we weren't really mentally prepared to do that. Whether it's going to a state school, which is a perfectly fine thing, whether it's like going to your state school, taking on too many student loans, getting stuck in entry-level work, moving in with your parents. Like there's so many things that people feel pretty coerced into doing and know that it's because of the recession. And I think so I think that it's actually pretty common sense for young people to believe that capitalism isn't working for us. And I think that that is the huge promise of DSA is to organize young people who are facing a lot of the same material conditions as working class people, whether it's debt, rent that's too high, wages that won't increase. And I think that young people really have a choice about who we're going to side with. Is it with working class people who have basically all of the same conditions that we do, or have very similar immediate conditions that we do? Of course, there are differences in wealth and privilege, but I mean, there are lots of people making $40,000, paying $1,000 in rent, and who are saddled with student debt. And that is actually not so different from the reality of the lives of many working class people in Boston. Or people can side with elite private universities, can side with big tech companies, with pharmaceutical companies. And so there's a real choice whether people side with working class people or employers of working class people. And so if capitalism already isn't really making sense to a lot of young people living in too much precarity, then we have an opportunity to build real bonds of solidarity, which is super exciting. And part of just orienting new members is to restore people's sense of political agency. And so that's a really bread and butter thing that we're doing in Boston DSA that I still find to be extremely exciting. Otherwise, we've been doing a lot of organizing with City Life Vida Urbana, which is an incredible housing justice movement building organization here in Boston. We've been canvassing a lot of tenants who are threatened with eviction, and they have a really interesting model that they call sword and shield. So the shield is legal defense, the sword is collective action. And so we're really hoping to expand that model to healthcare organizing. So I think for us to be able to win really transformative reforms like single-payer healthcare, we are going to need such a strong base of organized people that to overcome the really powerful insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and hospitals in Massachusetts and across the country, which means that we need all of the traditional tactics, whether it's canvassing, grassroots advocacy, rallies, etc. And we're going to need new entry points into base building. And so in Boston DSA, we have been slowly developing, but developing nonetheless kind of a popular education-focused medical debt relief clinic that we're hoping to roll out in October. And so we think that there's a huge amount of potential to relieve people's immediate problems by showing people what they can do before they seek care or after they've sought health care, to really work with working class people to fully demystify that taking on medical debt is not their fault. We know that 60% of foreclosures are tied to some incident of medical debt. So these issues of housing instability and medical debt are super interrelated, which is why we're so thrilled to be partnering with City Life Vida Urbana. And then once we find that there is some small critical mass of people who can't pay their medical bills at the same hospital, or they're getting sued, or they're getting calls from the same debt collector, then we will start to take collective action on those healthcare facilities, debt collectors, or any other type of corporate target that is making working class people's lives worse because of the healthcare system. And so I think that this is a pretty key intervention that we will make to healthcare organizing, and also just an exciting way we can test if the sword and shield model about evictions and taking collective action against crappy landlords applies to another kind of organizing. So we're really excited to see if this is a way to build the constituency for single-payer healthcare and lots of other types of important reforms to the healthcare system, if this is like a real way to building a base of working-class people that, quite honestly, the single-payer healthcare movement has been trying to build for years now.
Yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up with you about that campaign as it progresses. So you were a seasoned organizer before you joined DSA and did all of this stuff in the past year and a half, or almost 2 years at this point. What additional lessons do you feel like you've learned from being involved?
Yeah, I think that, oh God, what have I learned from being in DSA? I think that being part of this growing organization at such a critical, what feels like such a critical point in U.S. history is that as people have joined, having the type of organization that can absorb people and develop new organizers has been such an important learning experience for me. Usually, I mean, often in community organizing and student and campus organizing, we're just trying to maintain a core of people. And so we have such a strange opportunity in DSA where there are just people finding us and joining, and these are people who often are really new to the movement. And so we have this incredible opportunity that we I think have been pretty successful at seizing to organize young people, especially for a renewed left, and that's really, really exciting. And we've been able to add significant capacity to lots of local organizations. We have tons of people who are now trained in how to marshal rallies, how to canvass for candidates, how to organize tenants. These are all things that Boston DSA certainly wasn't doing even 2.5 years ago. And so it's been really, really exciting to learn how to build this like vast volunteer, very distributed kind of organization, which I personally have not been part of before. And it's been really exciting to build it while we're also using it. That of course has been challenging it in many ways, but I think that that's just part of the political moment that we're in.
Cool. And the last question I had was, right now, Trumpism is kind of the thing that hangs over all US politics. What do you think it'll take to defeat Trumpism, and do you see a role for elections in that?
Yeah, so I think the way that we will defeat Trump, which is kind of a big question, is aligning the forces of young people living in a lot of precarity with working class people, often people of color, to build an organized constituency to both resist and then defeat Trump. I think that at least reflecting on some of what happened in Wisconsin, since I probably read way too many think pieces in the aftermath of the election, and talked to a bunch of my friends who still live there. It really seems like people are sick of the kind of milquetoast Democratic Party type of candidates who don't appeal to Black folks on the north side of Milwaukee, and also don't appeal to commuter students in central Wisconsin at a 2-year college. And so I think one of the keys is for us to unite the interests of all of those types of people, whether they're community college students in Wausau, Wisconsin, with the interests of Black folks on the north side in Wisconsin, or in Massachusetts. It could be it could even be a entry-level recent college graduate who's paying way too much rent in a crappy apartment building with the interest of a home healthcare aide living in Springfield, Massachusetts. I think that having this huge generation of young folks who know that the system has not served us, plus all of the working class people, usually people of color, who also know that the system is not working for us, is the coalition that I think can be founded on real solidarity, on real material interests, and that is the core of a renewed left that hopefully will both defeat Trump in 2020 and help us realize some transformative reforms in the immediate future, and then will ultimately win us the magical vision of 21st century socialism in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up? I think that DSA does have some significant demographic challenges, and in some ways, it feels sometimes like it's an Achilles heel of DSA. But I think that given some of my theory of of what is the winning coalition, I actually sometimes think that it's okay if we have organized a large number of unorganized people, then who are then going to work in coalition with and build bonds of solidarity with working class people, particularly working class people of color, and take the lead from organizations when necessary, lead in times when there actually isn't anyone organizing something pretty significant, then I actually think that we will eventually overcome some of these demographic issues.
but you know, I think that a lot of young people of color in Boston, in DSA nationally and in Boston, are trying to come up with some interventions to begin to solve some of these issues.
Beth Huang, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thanks so much.